Alright, get ready because we're about to embark on a deep dive into Tiana's Bayou Adventure at the Magic Kingdom in Orlando, Florida. This isn't your typical review. We're going to explore every little aspect and detail of this attraction, and I'm going to share my unfiltered thoughts on this new ride. Now, the title of this video might give you a hint, but let me explain why I think Tiana's Bayou Adventure missed the mark. First, let's revisit June of 2020, the day the announcement was made. The parks were still closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and there was no clear timeline for Disney World's reopening. Then, unexpectedly, the announcement came. Splash Mountain would be replaced with Tiana's Bayou Adventure. This news came as a huge surprise and shock. Firstly, no one would have predicted that Splash Mountain, among all the rides at Disney World, would be chosen for a refresh. Secondly, the parks were closed, with zero reopening date in sight. At that time, Disney also still had to complete the construction of Tron Light Cycle Run and finish Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. And now this major project was added to the list out of nowhere. In fact, at the time, there was uncertainty about whether Splash Mountain would reopen with the park, or is it closed for good? They didn't give us any details. Luckily, it did reopen, but there was constant speculation about when will it finally shut down for this refurbishment. This uncertainty persisted for 2.5 years, until the ride finally closed for the overhaul in January 2023. Throughout 2022, it became apparent that the ride had to close soon, as maintenance efforts dwindled. The animatronics were deteriorating, logs were sinking, and effects were just randomly disappearing. It was clear that any investment in maintaining the ride has ceased. This was disheartening to witness, as Splash Mountain had been a staple in numerous Disney parks for years, and it seemed to be left to rot and decay until its eventual closure. By the time the ride closed, many people felt it was time to just put it out of its misery at that point. Now, you might be wondering, what does all this have to do with Tiana's Bayou Adventure? Well, as mentioned earlier, Disney announced this overhaul out of the blue during the pandemic when there was little to no business. The major overhaul was unexpected and unplanned. This is evident from the fact that they started construction 3 years after the initial announcement. This approach contrasts with previous overhauls at Disney. For example, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway was announced in July 2017, and the Great Movie Ride closed 2 weeks later. In September 2014, Disney announced Frozen Ever After, and Maelstrom closed the following month. In January 2012, Test Track was announced to close for refurbishment. 3 months later, in April, it would close to make way for Test Track 2.0. And now, Test Track 2.0 to 3.0, the announcement came in September 2023 and would close in June 2024. None of these projects took more than a year from announcement to closure. So the longest gap was 307 days between Test Track 2.0 announcement to Test Track 3.0 closure. In contrast, the gap between the announcement of Tiana's Bayou Adventure and the closure of Splash Mountain was 945 days. While this might seem like a long time to plan an entire ride, it is relatively short in the grand scheme of theme park projects, which often take 5 to 7 years or even longer. Theoretically, this project took only 3. Although this is not confirmed, Disney did say they were working on this ride for years in the making, but there were no rumors of this. Nothing really came out for this ride when normally there's a lot of speculation on stuff like this. This ride just came out of the blue, so it's really hard to believe that. I theorized a few months back, and after experiencing the attraction myself, I still believe this. In fact, I believe it more after riding the attraction. Now, let's delve into the overall experience of the attraction. Upon approaching it, the thematic incongruity is immediately apparent. Frontierland's Western-style architecture, exemplified by attractions like the Country Bear Jamboree, creates a stark contrast. When you turn around and find a blooming salt mine covered in flowers and greenery, especially when right next door you have Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, which is a desert covered in dry rocks, it seems Disney is working on transforming this area into a New Orleans-themed land, a change that ideally should have been executed more cohesively. The aesthetic of the attraction, while slightly misaligned with its surroundings, is nonetheless appealing. The bayou ambience is distinct and engaging. Though the off-ride view of Splash Mountain was arguably more harmonious with Frontierland, especially with its iconic tree stump sitting atop, the new ride looks a bit out of place, but it still holds its charm. As you approach, you'll find the new Critter Co-op shop, which as of this recording is still not open. And then the entrance to Tiana's Bayou Adventure. The signage here is modest and somewhat obscured, a departure from the grandiose marquee that marked Splash Mountain. The prominent signage for Tiana's Bayou Adventure is prominently located across the bridge. While smaller, these signs are effective, but lack the visual impact of their predecessors. The queue design for Tiana's Bayou Adventure represents a significant improvement. The extended portion remains unchanged, featuring garden and thematic equipment placed throughout. Many elements from Splash Mountain have been reused, including signage. The blend of old and new fencing throughout the queue results in a visual inconsistency that could be streamlined for a more unified look. Ideally, they should have opted for either one style of fence or the other to maintain consistency. Adjacent to the entrance, the Tiana's food carts and vibrant murals enrich the visual experience, offering a more colorful and dynamic aesthetic compared to the subdued Western buildings. Many might prefer the Western theme, but the vibrant and lively atmosphere brought by the Bayou theme is quite appealing. Inside the queue, thematic continuity is maintained with careful attention to detail, such as the use of original Splash Mountain signage renovated to match the new theme. I know this has been getting a lot of hate, but I like that they reused this. However, some elements like the 50-foot plunge sign could benefit from more distinctive graphics to better reflect the New Orleans theme and the essence of Princess and the Frog. The current graphics appear too generic and lack the thematic depth that would make them more fitting for the new attraction. The indoor sections of the queue are particularly well executed, featuring detailed replicas of Tiana's kitchen, completed with pantries and historical newspaper articles about Tiana's palace. These touches add depth and context to the queue experience. Instead of a balcony overlooking the queue's lower sections, there's now a new level showcasing Tiana's kitchen, which is a delightful addition. The transition into the mine section of the queue is well done, with updated videos and new props in the previously existing space. The station area itself had received some aesthetic improvements, including cranes holding Tiana's food crates and a new covered operation booth that cast members likely appreciate. The fresh paint job further enhances the station's appearance. Overall, while there haven't been extensive changes from Splash Mountain's queue, the updates are well executed and maintain much of the original charm. The queue for Tiana's Bayou Adventure is an improvement, offering a more engaging and visually appealing experience. The balance between old and new elements is generally well managed, making the attraction's presentation commendable. The thoughtful evolution respects the legacy of Splash Mountain while introducing a fresh, vibrant atmosphere that reflects the spirit of Tiana's Bayou Adventure. To sum it up, if there's anything Tiana's did better than Splash Mountain, it's definitely the queue. But now, it is time to board our log and finally experience Tiana's Bayou Adventure. The lap bar and log remain unchanged from Splash Mountain except for the removal of the small rabbit ornament at the front. As the ride dispatches, you begin to ascend the first lift. Notable updates including the food crate items around the turn and a ride operator booth just before lift 1, which I found quite interesting. The Brer Frog animatronic has been removed without a replacement. Ascending lift 1, you dive into the bayou. I must say, I love the swampy ambience during the ride. Although the trees appear somewhat artificial, the background jazz music and small touches like the lily pads and flowers enhance the experience. The massive water tower is a highlight, with new graphics and signage adorning the wall. Another significant change is the removal of the water jets that used to create anxiety for guests near the drop. I believe this is an improvement over the Briar Patch surroundings. However, I wish the area around the drop had more than just grass. As you ascend lift 2, you encounter your first animatronic. If there's one area where I will undoubtedly say Tiana's Bayou Adventure excels over Splash Mountain, it's the audio animatronics. They are absolutely sensational. Tiana introduces herself and explains that you are joining Lewis to find some musical critters for her Mardi Gras celebration. Interestingly, some shelves and theming from Splash Mountain remain unchanged, aside from a few small props and paint touch-ups. This is understandable given the budget allocation for the attraction. At the top of lift 2, you enter Tiana's garden, with the sign hanging overhead, a nice touch. Here you'll find Louise searching through the garden for critters as Almost There begins to play. This small outdoor section looks much better than Splash Mountain, with lush greenery replacing the dried tumbleweeds and many more props and sets enhancing the area. The reuse of the iconic tree is also appreciated. After this, you turn and descend where Slip and Falls used to be. There's little change in this section, and the drop still has the violent bump beforehand. Entering the bayou, my positive outlook began to wane. While I had been optimistic throughout much of the ride, this section fell short of my expectations. I really at this point was impressed with Tiana's Bayou Adventure, but that would all change real quickly as we entered the bayou. as things started going downhill real quick. First, I will go through each scene one by one and analyze them individually. Let's begin. You enter the bayou and are immediately immersed in its swampy atmosphere. As you turn, you encounter Luis, who explains how Tiana discovered some critters with musical talent. The next scene features these critters playing their instruments while Tiana talks about her discovery. Fireflies then appear, illuminating the swampy setting, and you see Luis and Tiana enjoying the critters' performance. Continuing down the bayou, you pass more fireflies and a small shack as you approach Tiana. She urges you to keep searching for more critters, and Mama Odie uses a potion to transform you into a frog before you descend the second drop. At this point, you become separated from Tiana and Luis, but you come across a cool frog playing drums. After descending the third drop, you continue to find more critters. Tiana and Luis reunite with you, realizing they have found the sound they were looking for as Dig a Little Deeper begins to play. Mama Odie then turns you back into a human as you ascend lift 3, preparing for the party ahead. You dive down the fourth drop, concluding the adventure. Now, let's revisit the beginning and analyze each aspect. Upon entering, I immediately noticed a reduction from 6 animatronics to 1 in the initial scene, with nothing but grass and flowers replacing it. This raises the debate of quality versus quantity, as the Luis animatronic is indeed superior to any of the previous ones in the scene. However, the scene feels lacking due to the sparse placement of animatronics and the minimal effort in set dressing, with just a few flowers added instead of what once was a very lively scene. The Luis animatronic, however, is incredible. I like how most of the animatronics in the ride are sequenced with the boats passing by. I know it's been causing a ton of issues, but it is a really nice touch. It adds a new level of immersion to this ride that wasn't there before. This is also where we get our first real feel of the storyline, and I think what just made this ride blow was this storyline itself. It's awful. It's genuinely awful. You would find this more throughout the ride, as in the next scene you found some critters who could play the music and your next Tiana animatronic. Again, all of these animatronics are incredible. What I appreciated in this scene was the small tribute to Splash Mountain, featuring a stump placed in the bayou. It was a sweet touch. However, this is where the ride takes a darker turn. And I don't mean the storyline takes a twist, I mean no, it genuinely gets darker, like you can't see anything. The section that follows just feels empty. Previously, it featured Brer Porcupine singing and playing his drum, Brer Raccoon on the harmonica, and a lively garden scene with 2 rabbits observing Brer Fox and Brer Bear chasing Brer Rabbit. Now, the scene had been replaced with firefly projection mapping, making it just feel lackluster compared to its vibrant predecessor. Next, when you encounter Tiana and Luis, they repeat their line about the critters' musical talent, and you see more critters playing instruments. The scene does have the most animatronics aside from the finale, but it still pales in comparison to Splash Mountain's dynamic scenes, which included Brer Fox's trap catching Brer Bear, Brer Rabbit hopping next to your log, and Brer Frog fishing on Brer Crocodile. There was simply more to look at before. Following this, you'll enter another sparse section with little to nothing except a shack, similar to Splash Mountain's equivalent. Again, Tiana and Luis appear repeating their lines about finding more critters. Suddenly, Mama Odie appears and transforms you into a frog. A bit of context here would have been appreciated, because out of nowhere she just appears and she's turning into a frog. Why? There's no explanation of this. It just all of a sudden happens. At least I kind of knew what was happening, but the general storyline to really anyone riding in the general public is going to have no idea what's going on and why all of a sudden everything is massive. You then experience drop 2 with projections making you feel like you're transforming into a frog, which was well done. Though it felt a bit cheap, it was still well done. The next scene highlighting your new frog-sized perspective is underwhelming. Aside from a frog playing bongos, there isn't much to see. This section has significantly declined in quality compared to what it once was. You then go down drop 3 where the scene remains largely unchanged. Giant mushrooms and frogs playing instruments are still present, but the end of the scene is where it gets really bad once again. Before the final lift, it is now dominated by screens. Tiana and Luis repeat their lines, and Firefly screens replace what used to be more detailed scenes. In fact, one of the most iconic sections of the ride, where Brer Fox was holding Brer Rabbit in a beehive, is now a screen with fireflies. This shift to screens is disappointing and feels like a cost-cutting measure, especially evident with the replacement of the 2 ravens by a screen. That's right, so immediately following this, the 2 ravens were replaced by a screen with Mama Odie and Juju. This was frustrating. The lift itself, now featuring a light showing your transformation back to a human, is a nice touch. It at least has something on the lift. The Mama Odie animatronic at the top is well done. It adds positively to the experience. The final drop remains unchanged and iconic, providing an amazing view of Magic Kingdom and a refreshing splash without soaking you. However, after reviewing each scene, it's clear that while the animatronics are impressive, they seem to have been the sole focus of the investment. Many sections feel too empty or too dark. Splash Mountain was lively, with multiple animatronics in every section engaging you in the story. In contrast, this ride feels dull with a repetitive and uninspiring story. From Lift 2 to the final drop, it's just about helping Tiana and Luis find critters for a party, with each scene feeling like a repeat of the last. Unfortunately, my initial concern in my first video about maintaining interest over a 12-minute ride has proven valid. And sure, you can say these animatronics are much better than the ones in Splash Mountain. That I agree with. But if you're gonna rip out any animatronics at all, don't replace it with nothing. Replace it with something. Even a statue would have been appreciated. Returning to the ride, you pass through the small outdoor section where not much has changed. The waterfall of death and anxiety is still present. After descending the final small drop, you enter the finale scene. Although I adore Splash Mountain's finale, this one does surpass it. The New Orleans atmosphere is captivating, with a charming Crystal Palace-like building on the right and classic New Orleans-style architecture throughout. While the song doesn't quite match the charm of Zippity Doo Dah, it remains pleasant and catchy. Moreover, the animatronics are phenomenal, making the scene visually impressive. I particularly enjoy the scene with two frogs at a nicely set table and the silhouette of Tiana's palace in the background, which is quite neat. The Mama Odie scene at the end is also well done. Although this section suffers from being overly dark, despite this, it is another area that, while good, it's a shadow of its former self. Finally, you return to the station, concluding your journey through Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Overall, I believe there are aspects of Tiana's that surpass Splash Mountain, such as the finale scene, the outdoor sections, and the queue. There are definitely noticeable improvements. However, the majority of Tiana's ride does not measure up to Splash Mountain, which is quite disappointing. While the animatronics are impressive, they aren't enough to salvage the horrible storyline. Although it's unlikely, Disney could save this ride if they wanted to. How? Well, there's two things you could add right off the bat. Notice Naveen, Tiana's love interest, is in the ride for one scene, and I didn't even notice him till I watched the video back. And he's a huge part of the original movie. Another huge part of the original movie is Dr. Facilier, which everyone wanted to see in this ride, and we didn't get him. Yes, he's dead. Yes, this is post Princess and the Frog, but we all would have much rather seen a retelling of the story than a continuation of the story. So they could have maintained all the elements by basing the ride off of the story in the movie rather than a continuation of post Princess and the Frog. Imagine if the ride began with Tiana becoming a frog as you enter the indoor section, following the movie's plot and culminating with Dr. Facilier's death at the very end. Picture this. You go up the final lift, you see the vortex pulling you in, and at the top, instead of Mama Odie, there's Dr. Facilier animatronic getting sucked in as you drop down to escape. This would have been incredible. It adds that tension back, it adds the build-up back, and it makes it something special. The ride does have immense potential, but unfortunately, they just severely missed the mark. Now, is it a bad ride? No. But is it a disappointing ride? Yes. The crucial question remains, is Tiana's a downgrade from Splash Mountain? Yes, without a doubt. Splash Mountain needed an update or a refresh, there is no question. But if you're going to replace it entirely, this new ride must be exceptional, and this one falls short. In many ways, this could be Disney's biggest failure. Reviews have been mostly negative, and the downtime has been dreadful, with the ride being evac'd almost every single day since it opened, and they are not ready for daily operation on this thing. It is clear, and the outlook for this ride is bleak. I will ride it a few more times to give it additional chances, but currently, the ride feels like a mere shadow of its former self. So with that, I want to know your thoughts on this ride, and feel free to disagree with me. I'm all about hearing everyone's opinions. I want to know everything down in the comment section below, so tell me your thoughts on Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Tell me what you agreed with me on and what you disagreed with me on. I would love to hear everyone's opinion on this ride. If you enjoyed these kinds of videos, then make sure to subscribe, as that is the best way to support the channel. we have a lot of epic videos coming up that you are not going to want to miss out on. So thank you for joining me in this long review of Tiana's Bayou Adventure. As always, this is Hunter from Theme Park Hunting. I'll see you all later, and follow the thrill.